Tonight you'll pull a shirt over your head without thinking twice. You'll zip up a jacket, you'll tie your shoes. It feels automatic, almost invisible. But somewhere in your ancient past, a human being had none of this. No cloth, no thread, no needle, just skin, and a world that wanted to kill them. So when did that change? When did your ancestors first decide to cover themselves? You might guess it happened the moment humans left Africa for colder places. That seems logical. Cold weather, cold skin, so you cover up. But the real answer is far stranger. Scientists didn't find the first clothes by digging up fabric. Fabric rots. It vanishes in a few hundred years, let alone 100,000. Instead, they found the answer inside something much smaller, something still living on human bodies today. Lice. Yes, lice? Tiny insects that have ridden along on human skin and hair for millions of years. But here's the twist. There are two kinds of lice that live on you. Head lice, which cling to hair, and body lice, which live inside clothing, only visiting skin to feed. Body lice cannot survive without fabric. No clothing, no body lice. It's that simple. So a geneticist named Mark Stoneking had an idea. If you could figure out when body lice split off from head lice, genetically, you'd know roughly when humans started wearing clothes. Because body lice couldn't have existed before there was something to live in. His team compared the DNA of both lice types. They looked at how many mutations separated them. Mutations build up at a fairly steady rate over time, like a slow-ticking clock. Count the differences, and you can estimate how long ago the two lice populations diverged. The number that came back surprised everyone, roughly 170,000 years ago. Think about that. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, had already existed for tens of thousands of years by then, which means for a huge stretch of early human history, you were naked, fully exposed, no stitched hide, no woven fiber, just bare skin against wind, rain, and cold nights. Why so late? Why didn't clothing appear the moment humans needed warmth? Because for a long time, humans didn't need it. Early Homo sapiens evolved in Africa, in warm climates. Your body was already built for heat. Long limbs to release warmth. Minimal body hair, replaced by a dense covering of sweat glands, more sweat glands than almost any other mammal on Earth. This wasn't a flaw, it was a cooling system. It let early humans run prey to exhaustion under the midday sun, when other predators had to rest in the shade. But that same body was a liability the moment temperatures dropped. An anthropologist named Ian Gilligan has spent years studying exactly this problem. He argues that clothing wasn't invented for comfort. It was invented for survival, and only when survival demanded it. Gilligan's research points to a specific trigger: ice ages. As global temperatures plunged during glacial periods, hairless, sweat-cooled bodies became a serious disadvantage. You needed insulation your own skin couldn't provide. So around the time body lice appear in the genetic record, the climate was turning brutal. Which means clothing likely wasn't a clever invention born from curiosity. It was a desperate adaptation, a tool built because the alternative was death. But wait. There's a problem with dating this by lice alone. Genetic clocks come with a wide margin of error. 170,000 years could really mean anywhere from 100,000 to 240,000. So researchers looked for a second kind of clue. Not biological, technological. Bone needles. A needle means something specific, not just wrapping an animal hide around your shoulders like a blanket. A needle means piercing material and pulling thread through it. It means tailoring, fitted clothing, sleeves, layers. The kind of clothing that could trap warm air against skin far more effectively than a draped hide ever could. The oldest confirmed bone needles found in Siberia date back around 40,000 years. That's much more recent than the lice estimate. So most researchers now believe clothing happened in stages. First, simple draped hides, sometime before 100,000 years ago, probably in response to cooling climates. Then, much later, true tailored clothing with needles, thread, and fitted seams, once humans pushed into truly frigid environments, like Ice Age Siberia and the edges of the Arctic. And this timing lines up with something else. A geneticist named Ralph Kittler, working alongside Stone King, found additional evidence supporting the idea that clothing use expanded significantly as humans migrated into colder latitudes. The further humans moved from the African tropics, the more essential clothing became, not as decoration, but as the only thing standing between a soft-skinned, heat-adapted primate and a frozen world it was never built for. Here's what's strange to sit with. Every other cold climate animal on Earth solved this problem with biology: thick fur, blubber, hibernation. Humans solved it with culture, with invention. Your ancestors didn't evolve a new body to survive the cold. They built one out of hide, sinew, and bone needles. That's a profound shift in how evolution usually works. Instead of waiting thousands of generations for genetic mutation to catch up with the environment, your ancestors changed the environment around their bodies instead. Clothing was, in a very real sense, the first form of portable shelter, a wearable microclimate. You could carry your own warmth with you, anywhere you walked. And once that leap happened, everything else became possible. Without clothing, there is no crossing into Siberia, no walking across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas, no surviving the brutal winters of Ice Age Europe. Clothing didn't just keep individual humans alive, it functioned like a key, unlocking entire continents that would have otherwise stayed permanently out of reach. Think about what that means. The shirt on your back tonight has a direct, unbroken line back to a moment when a human being, freezing under an open sky, first tied an animal hide around their shoulders and realized it worked. That single decision eventually let your species walk from the equator to the edge of the Arctic Circle. There's something else worth noticing. Lice, that small, unpleasant detail of human history, ended up rewriting the story of how humanity conquered the cold. Nobody expected a parasite to hold the receipt for one of the most important inventions humans ever made. But it did. Written into its own DNA, quietly for thousands of generations, was a record of the exact moment its host started wearing something it could hide inside. So the next time something in your life feels too small to matter, remember this. A tiny insect, smaller than a grain of rice, preserved evidence that scientists needed to understand a turning point in human survival. Sometimes the biggest answers are hiding inside the smallest places. And the next time you get dressed, pulling on a shirt, zipping up a jacket, tying your shoes, you're repeating an act your ancestors performed for the first time under desperate, freezing skies, not out of style, not out of habit, out of necessity, at the very edge of survival. Tonight you'll pull a shirt over your head without thinking twice. But for the first time in nearly 200,000 years, maybe you will.